Welcome to the Business of Doing Science podcast, brought to you by Bagamian Scientific Consulting. On this podcast, we discuss different aspects of pursuing science-related careers and just how science is actually done beyond the bench. So stay tuned to find out more. Hello everyone, I'm Karun Bagamian, and I'm joined today by my co-hosts Lindsay Leitner and Heidi Bolduc. We're very excited to kick off our inaugural episode with our friend Elaine Kiba, who has a very interesting story of her career transition from academia to industry. To start us off, Heidi has a little background for us on the history of a PhD. Thanks for joining us, and let's get started.
Thank you, Karun. So we are going to be exploring the evolution of advanced degrees. And the question here is, did you know that originally advanced degrees were not required to become a professor in the United States? In fact, graduate students had to go study in Germany overseas for about 3 years in order to obtain their PhD. This was all the way back in the 1850s. And it was only once Harvard and Yale launched their first PhD program about 20 years later, so around the 1870s, that PhDs slowly began to become more accepted. Then in 1919, the Rockefeller Foundation decided to establish the first postdoctoral fellowship program. The goal of it at that time was to provide recent graduates with the opportunity to continue to build their teaching and also their research skills so that they could hopefully take on tenure track positions. So really the goal at that time was to, produce professors from their participation in that fellowship program.
I had no idea.
And providing this type of advanced training also made sense, really, as well, when you look at the changing landscape of the United States following World War II. At this point, undergraduate and graduate degree programs, so pretty much any college degree, was expanding like crazy as returning soldiers came home and also returned to the workplace. So fast forward about another 30 years, and by the 1980s, highly educated people became more common, and therefore the education requirements for certain careers, you did see that they did begin to increase. So high-profile jobs such as those in foreign policy, international intelligence, careers like that, now expected candidates to hold advanced degrees. However, the interesting thing about all of this advancement meant that there were more candidates competing for a surprisingly small number of professorships in academia. So fast forward to 2021, and now there are a lot of statistics and research out there that says less than 1% of PhD graduates actually end up working as tenure track professors.
Wow.
Many of those people go on to work in research related positions in industry. So most of the time people bounce around, they might try to work in academia, try to do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But ultimately, a lot of them, the vast majority of them do go on to work in industry. And this is why we feel it's very important to discuss making this transition from academia to industry. In fact, we even have a guest speaker today who is here to tell you about exactly that and tell you a little bit more about her personal transition.
Thank you, Heidi. Yeah, I had no idea about any of that. That's really interesting. And I can't believe that it's that low at this point because, I've heard figures thrown around and less than 1% is really low. And it's funny because sometimes I feel like that's viewed as a traditional trajectory of what a PhD does. And when you're in grad school, that's what is shown to you, even though more programs are showing a wider, range of careers. But that's crazy that it's only less than 1%.
Totally. And that there's no prep, for that, 99.5% of people that are, trying to get out in the workforce.
And I checked multiple sources, and that's just the flow of what ends up happening. Sometimes people try to stay in academia and then they just don't or can't. So.
And that's exactly why I asked Elaine to join us today. So I know Elaine from my graduate degree. We met in graduate school, and I know her story, but she's going to tell us all her story because it is an interesting one, and it was one of the earlier transitions I saw, and I thought was pretty great. And I know that it wasn't exactly where she thought she would end up, but it has worked out pretty well from her. So, hi, Elaine.
Hi, ladies. Hey, Corinne. It's really nice to talk to you again. It's been a while.
That's right. I'm doing well, and I'm really, really looking forward to talking about this with you. So, the first question. Sorry, you were saying something?
No, I was going to say I'm excited too. I'm glad that you all invited me, and I too am shocked by the number of less than 1%.
Right.
I was expecting it to be around 10%.
Yeah, because that's what I used to hear too. But it makes sense because I bet you every year more and more people are getting those degrees, so it just reduces, and there's less jobs. Right. So the first and most important question is, Elaine, what do you do? And even more importantly, how did you get there?
All right. So the official title of my job is therapy consultant for deep brain stimulation. And what that is I have a sales position for a medical device company, Boston Scientific. And I basically assist in all aspects of patients who have Parkinson's disease who are going to be implanted with a deep brain stimulator that will help treat the motor symptoms of that disease. So I get to do things from be in the neurology clinic with the neurologist while they program these devices, to being in the surgery while the neurosurgeon implants the devices, to various other things that involve patient education, community outreach, all kinds of things. It's a really cool job. It's really fun, and I feel like it's a privilege that I get to do it. The other question of how did I get there is quite the path, because as you said, it is definitely not. I didn't even know this was a job available when I went to grad school, right? So I'd never even heard of this. If you had told me this was a job that people did, I would not have believed you. So it's definitely quite a winding path, but it's a journey that was really fun the whole way. So I'm definitely excited to share that with you all.
I have one question before we move on to that, actually. For our listeners that might be, a lot of people hear about Parkinson's disease, but I'm sure a lot of people don't know exactly what it is. So what is it exactly, and how many people are affected by it?
Well, that's a great question. So Parkinson's disease is a degenerative movement disorder. It's actually marked by a decrease in dopamine-producing cells in the brain. And it's interesting because we don't actually know what causes the disease. We know about 10% of people with it have a genetic cause, and then the rest of them we don't know. So it's it's likely environmental or some kind of gene by environment interaction. And it's actually becoming more prevalent. Yeah. So it affects 1 in a million Americans, and then if you look at it worldwide, there's more than 10 million people affected by it. And recently there was actually a book published by one of the leading neurologists in this field out of the University of Florida, right there in Gainesville, where you guys are, talking about how it looks like Parkinson's might actually become a pandemic. Like it's on the rise that much. So I'm sure many of our listeners will probably at least have someone they know, whether it be a family member or a friend, that's impacted by Parkinson's in some way.
That's right. I do know people that have it.
Same. My late father, he got it towards the end of his life and was on medications for it, but we don't know exactly, what the cause was still to this day. So wild.
Yeah. So at some point in this interview, I'll tell you guys what deep brain stimulation does for Parkinson's patients, but it's truly a miracle. And it's just one of those jobs where you're like, wow, I got to be a part of that today.
Yeah, maybe when you're describing maybe when we talk more about like your current job duties, might be a good time to talk about that.
Yeah.
So, so let's talk about how you got to this amazing job in a really obviously important, helping patients live better lives, which is amazing. So So how about your educational history? What I said we're in the same program, but I didn't talk about specifics. So yeah. So tell us a little bit. Yeah.
So the first university that I went to was University of Georgia in Athens. And I think like a lot of people, I started out with the pre-med track, right? I was going to be a doctor. And somewhere along the way, I got a job in research and just fell in love with it. And so then I changed paths a little bit. You don't have to change too much, right? When you go from a pre-med major to research. And so I studied genetics at the University of Georgia. And then after that, surprisingly, my now husband, but boyfriend then, we decided that we were just going to sell all of our stuff. So we sold everything we owned and moved to Costa Rica. And we actually worked at a research station that was run by the University of Georgia. So we had research projects that we did, and then we would have college study abroad classes that would come through, and we would help teach those classes. So my parents were very unhappy when we did that, right? Because they thought I should be getting a job or going to med school, not running around Central America broke and working for free. But we did that.
Sounds so awesome.
Sounds like my dream.
On so many levels.
Yeah, we often laugh. We say, if only we knew how blessed we were back then to not have any money and not have a care in the world, Yeah. But yeah, we did that for 3 years. And it was during that time that I was like, wow, like I knew that research was where my passion was. At least at that time in my life. You're going to hear that I have a lot of passion all throughout my life. Probably overuse the word, but
nothing wrong with that. Home, I get it. Yeah.
That's right. So we hitchhiked home, and in the 3 months it took us to hitchhike home, I decided that I was going to go back to graduate school so that I could do research and run my own research lab, and basically ask the questions that I wanted to ask, not somebody else's questions. And so when I got back, I had to get a job, obviously, before I could figure out how to go back to school. And I somehow landed the coolest job for me at that time at the CDC, working with vaccine. Like we were developing vaccines for pandemic preparedness. So we were getting ready for a bird flu that hadn't hit yet. And so the first 2 weeks were really cool. I got to wear one of those biohazard suits, and walked around like a marshmallow woman and did the research in there. And then after about 2 weeks, I realized that all the novelty had worn off, and having to shower into your job and shower out of your job after being in an air suit for, 8 hours wasn't really all that sexy anymore.
Yeah.
So during that time, I applied to various grad schools and landed on a PhD program at Emory University, where I actually met Karun. Her and I were we in the same? I feel like I remember us being in the same interview group. And
yeah, we were. We were in the same cohort too. Yes, that's right. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, and I remember us sitting outside on like a porch, just talking and laughing, and like really just became, like instant friends, almost like we had known each other previously, right. And we really connected. Right. And I was like, gosh, I hope we both end up here together.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And we did, and so we did that, and that the focus for that program was population biology, ecology, and evolution, which, as it might sound, is pretty broad. So we all kind of had different things that we focused in, and mine happened to be evolutionary genetics, right? And so I studied how genes get lost, and then how they get reborn in the human genome and across genomes, and landed on this really cool disease called Lesch-9 disease. And Karun, I don't know how much you want me to go into that. Obviously, I'm very passionate about that too, so I could talk about that for, an hour, but I won't. And so that led me to really be fascinated with the brain and how genes in the brain can impact movements and behaviors. And so after finishing my PhD at Emory, I went over to a primate center where they did a lot of neuroscience work, and continued to study how the genes interact with different neurodegenerative disorders over there. And my intent was, to be really successful at writing grants and open my own lab and, be on the cover of Forbes as, you know, the woman that changes the face of neuroscience research and, you know, maybe cures autism. And so I was well on my way to do that. And I don't remember really how it happened, but I read about deep brain stimulation for patients with Lesch-9 disease, which was one of the diseases that we were studying. And we had actually found a protein that might be involved in it.
Oh, I didn't know that you.
Then I got to go up.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was like, that's interesting. I didn't know that like you worked on that at that time too.
Oh,
cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I took part of that with me. I also worked on some stuff with autism and schizophrenia.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
But I found there was a guy up at the Cleveland Clinic who wanted to do deep brain stimulation on a patient with Lesch-9 disease, and I got to go up there and watch and help him pick which target, because I was studying a region of the brain called the nucleus accumbens. So I got to go up there and be a part of that, and it was just the most incredible thing. So these patients with Lesch-9 disease have obsessive compulsive behavior, but it manifests in a self-injurious way. So they'll, you know, they'll actually injure themselves. So they'll bite their fingers, their lips, sometimes their tongues. And it's more of like, they don't want to hurt themselves, but it's like this compulsion that they have. And sometimes they'll even injure their caregivers. And so this particular patient really didn't have any other options left, because he was going through puberty, and the mother was going to have to, you know, institutionalize him because he was a danger to her and the other kids. And just seeing the impact of this particular procedure, you know, before he had it, and then how it impacted the family afterwards, was incredible. And for me, I think it just was this change in my head, and I was like, that's what I need to do. Like, it felt like that was my calling.
Interesting.
Wow.
Yeah. And so for the next probably
how did
7 years, that was.
Yeah. Sorry. How did it change his, what happened after, like before and after? Can you kind of paint a picture for us about that? Yeah.
Yeah. So this is a little different than Parkinson's disease, which is what I do now. But in this particular case, and this isn't FDA approved or anything, so it was a study, but it treated the obsessive compulsive behavior of him. And so I was only privy to the first 3 months follow-up. But when we followed up and saw the mother, she was crying. The boy had not injured himself. And so she was able to care for him and actually keep him in the home.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was incredible. Like, I mean, the mother cried, I cried, the surgeon cried. It was just like the most heartwarming experience, you know, I had ever had up to that point in my career.
It's such an incredible impact on that person's life.
Yeah.
Through that one procedure.
And every time I would go back to the lab, I would just think of like, is the lab work I'm doing, is this going to be applied to make somebody's quality of life better? You know, and the answer was probably not. The answer for me, at least, was not today, and probably not, you know, 10 years from now. Maybe in your lifetime, maybe not. And that just stuck with me. And at some point along the way, I shared with some of the other people that I'd worked with, one of which was a surgeon at the Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville, who's now retired, but this experience and how that's what I wanted to do. And this opportunity came up with Boston Scientific, and I guess he remembered me in that conversation and, you know, made that connection happen. And then one thing led to another, and here I am, you know, doing this thing that I first saw 15 years ago, but now doing it with a different disease state.
Wow, that's amazing. Didn't you work at another company in between? Is that right?
I did. Yeah, I did.
That's what I thought.
Of like, so I tried to get into this immediately, right, with another company who had this device on the market first, and basically they were not interested in someone with a PhD doing a sales role.
I love this story. This is a good story. This is please tell us about this.
Sounds like it's going to be good.
It's really relevant. Yes.
So they told me that, you know, they appreciated the interest, but, you know, someone with a PhD wasn't really appropriate for this job, that, you know, I had to have skills that were transferable to being able to have real conversations with people, and that in their experience, people with PhDs didn't have that. And, I was like, well, you could just at
Wow.
least interview me, right? And you could see, I would think I would be really good at this, and they just wouldn't have it. And it's interesting because that was, over 10 years ago when that happened. And I would say that the field is changing now. There are a handful of PhDs in sales positions that are doing really well. And so I think as time goes on, we'll see that, especially with some of these more advanced technologies, that's changing. Yeah. So more advanced degrees are more common. And it does take us, it does take a special set of skills to do it. But that being said, not every person who has a degree in international business is going to be a good salesperson, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And every PhD isn't going to be a good salesperson. That's why, thankfully, we have a lot of different things that we can do out there, find the thing that's right for us.
One of the things that I remember this part of this story, which I remember you told me that, where after you worked for that company, they actually wanted you to recruit other PhDs, people with PhDs that you knew that would be a good fit, because they realized that the skills that you brought to it, like you were an independent problem solver, which they did not necessarily see out of some of the other people that they had doing your job.
Yeah. So that's right. So actually, the company I was talking about before didn't ever actually gave me a job, but I did end up getting a job with a company called ClearPoint Neuro, and they were a company that was developing a way to deliver devices to the brain while the patient's asleep. So it's traditionally, brain surgery is done awake. So, and I had been doing things like that, but in animal models. And so they too, you're exactly right. They were hesitant to hire me, but they're like, we're going to give it a shot. And it was such a great opportunity for me. I filled that role perfectly. And I think the bridge from having been in academic research to this new startup company that, had a new device that wasn't perfect, there was a lot of room to make it better. And so it was actually a really good fit. And you are right. Today, they've hired at least 2 people that I've connected them with from Emory, that I worked with at the Primate Center. And I know of another PhD that they hired while I was with them. And I haven't been with them in about 5 years. So yeah, you're right. So we changed the way that company looked pretty early on. And
and I think that's
there's
amazing.
a lot of others following.
Yeah.
So
cool.
So if anyone's out there listening with a PhD and you want to get in medical devices, just remember I was told no the very first time, and here I am. So persistent.
Very successful, and having done it for quite a while now. Wow, we're a lot older than I remember. Just kidding.
We are. Let's don't give our age away.
Yeah, I'm not.
They got to hang around for a little bit longer.
Yeah.
That's
so do you
funny.
Did you think that there was any particular degree or educational trajectory that would help someone be good at your current job?
That's a really good question. And I've thought about that. And I don't, when I think about the people that I work with who are my colleagues across the U.S., I kind of think of us as like this motley crew, right? So like we all have different educational backgrounds, but there are some commonalities that I see. So
cool. What are they?
So we all probably work way more than we should. We have a really difficult time with balancing quality of life versus work life, because I think our work does bring us some of our quality of life. So we work way too much. The other one is that, I think you have to be self-driven, right? Like you have to find pride or take some kind of accountability in your work so that you're driven to kind of like figure out what it is that you need. And that doesn't really make sense the way I said it. So let me say it a different way. There's a lot of things that have to be done with this job. So, right, we want to find patients that we want to help the patients, learn about the procedure, right? So they have access to it. Sometimes we help them find a physician that'll do it. Sometimes we're in the neurology office to figure out, to help them figure out how to get the programming right, or in the surgery, and sometimes the device doesn't work correctly. It's not often, but sometimes it doesn't, which is why we're there. So you have to be able
to fix it,
to stay calm. And when there's a patient on the table, right, that's got their brain exposed, and you got to figure out what's wrong. So it's just a lot of different hats. But I think if you like that kind of thing, like if you like to always be doing something a little bit different, you know, you like to continuously educate yourself and learn more about different things. So for me, that was one of the draws of this job, is that I'm never doing the same thing, but two, there's always something new in the field that I can learn.
Yeah.
You know, and I think for me, the PhD helped, not necessarily the PhD, but being able to read primary literature, understand if it's, you know, a good study, a bad study, or at least what the caveats might be or what the really strong points are. And then being able to take that to, say, a new physician that I want to introduce this to, and be able to have a conversation with him or her at their level.
Yeah.
That gives me an advantage in some cases, to be able to have those conversations.
Yeah.
You know, and then the other thing I feel like graduate school really helped me with in this job, which I definitely did not appreciate it at the time, is being able to talk science with, you know, someone who doesn't know as much as you do. So like when I go home at night and tell my husband about it, or I go tell my mom about it, you know, you really got to understand it to be able to share it with them. Mm-hmm. And in this case, to really be able to help patients get access to the education that they need, you have to be able to translate what it is in a way that they can understand.
Yep.
And so, you know, I think my graduate school experience helped with that as well.
Yeah, because you also taught while you're in grad school too. I remember that. Like you did a lot when you were in grad school. Also, for our audience, she also gave birth twice, I believe, during that time.
I did. I remember. This is a funny story. So I remember I was 9 months pregnant when I defended my dissertation, and my first pregnancy, you know, took 2 days for the baby to be born. So I remember, you know, Jim asked me, he's like, "What are we going to do if you go into labor?" You know, my advisor, and I was like, "We're not going to do anything. We're going to finish this because I'm not coming back. Like this is happening today. Like I'll stand here in labor. It took two days last time. Like just bring me a chair." Luckily, that didn't happen. And you know, one of my fondest memories is when you all left, right? And I had the examination where they asked me all the questions, and then I came out to celebrate because I'd passed. You and all the girls had stuffed your stomachs.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I need to dig that picture up. That one's a good one. So funny.
Yeah, that was a good picture.
And I remember you all looked way more pregnant than me. And Corinne, if I remember correctly, you had a like a sideways belly.
Oh my God.
I was like, I can tell none of y'all have been pregnant before. Y'all, it's way too long.
That's a good one. That was funny. So I think you kind of touched upon this, but by saying that your work days are not that similar to each other, but what would you say like a typical work day or a couple of different like of your work days would be like, you know, just a mixture of what you do over the course of a day. So somebody would know what they might expect when they had your job, if they had your job. Yeah.
Great question. So maybe I can tell you about like what my week looks like.
Yeah, exactly. That's perfect.
So like this week, so today's Thursday, right? So I'm going to start with what I did today, and then we'll work kind of backwards and forwards.
Yeah.
But so this morning I actually went into the hospital I was at. So yesterday we implanted 2 patients with a deep brain stimulator. They both had Parkinson's disease. And then, so they got, you know, a lead that goes into the brain that delivers the stimulation. And they also got their battery packs, which is implanted right under the clavicle, under the skin, and that powers the lead. So this morning I went into the hospital, and the neurosurgeon met me there in the patient's room, and we actually turned their devices on. And so that was a pretty cool morning. Like those are my favorite mornings, actually. So, you know, the patient has this really bad tremor, and we turn the device on and evaluate the patient and optimize it so that it gets, you know, those symptoms gone. They have, they'll have more programmings after that. But yeah, so that's what I got to do today. So today was probably my most rewarding thing that I get to do in this job, right? Because some of these patients actually go from not being able to, you know, drink a cup of water because their hand is tremoring so bad, to then being able to feed themselves again without having to have someone help them or dress their clothes.
It's incredible.
And sometimes they cry, sometimes the caregiver cries. I'm always telling myself, don't cry, Elaine, don't cry, Elaine. but if I do, it's tears of happy joy, right? So it's okay.
Yeah, of course.
So that's what I did today.
That's
and then,
amazing.
after I come home from a day like that, I also had I had a call with one of the girls on my team and my boss about some strategy things that we're trying to do down a little further south to get more neurologists to refer into this particular clinic. Yesterday, I was actually in surgery all day with these two patients. And so those days are actually really cool too, right? Because I get to go in there and watch a surgeon do brain surgery, and he's on one side of the patient. And then there's a neurologist on the other side of the patient because these patients are awake. And the neurologist is there basically explaining to them everything that's going on, evaluating them, making sure that there's, nothing happening that he needs to let the neurosurgeon be aware of. And then once the surgeon puts the device in, I get to turn it on. And then alongside the neurologist, evaluate how the patient's responding. And it's really cool because they can do that while the patient's awake. So we can see, we'll take tremor again and just use that as our focus. But, if the patient has tremor and then we turn the device on and the tremor goes away, we know we're in a good spot.
Yeah.
We can also look at, we can also
that's
turn
incredible.
it up we can turn it up high and see what kind of, we call them side effects the patient has. So they may have tingling in their hand or pulling in their face. And by doing that, we can actually map out where the lead is at in the brain. So having that plus, the clinical benefit, we can say if we're in the right spot or not. And the great thing is, if we're not in the right spot, the neurosurgeon can move it according to where the brain map tells us we are and get it in the right spot before the patient leaves the OR.
Wow.
So that was yesterday. So that's a really cool day too.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Jeez.
And then I've actually had a really busy week. So this is actually a really good example. So Tuesday, I was actually in Panama City Beach, and we had a support group meeting there. So it was for Parkinson's patients. And this particular meeting, I just kind of help facilitate conversations around deep brain stimulation. So all the people show up. I tell them a little bit about deep brain stimulation and what it is, how it can improve certain symptoms of Parkinson's disease. And then we just sat around and talked about it, like what their symptoms are. Could it possibly be a good fit for deep brain stimulation? And if they're interested, how would they get more information? And those are really rewarding days too, except for that I had to drive 6 hours to get there.
That's not close.
Those patients, they're also really always so appreciative too, because, they don't always know where to go to get this information.
Yeah.
And I can't remember what I did on Monday. And then I can't remember. And tomorrow I have a girl on my team that I'll be riding around along with when we'll go be visiting some neurology offices, just kind of checking in, making sure that they're all set. If they have any questions about patients they're referring to the surgery center, we'll answer those. Maybe talk a little bit about some new science that's come out.
Interesting.
So, it's kind of a diverse job. But I would say that this week kind of encapsulates everything that I do.
Oh, okay.
So a little bit of all of it. And then there's a little bit of sometimes, we'll have to deal with the business side of things. So hospital contracts and billing for the devices and all of that. That's my least favorite part of the job, but it's a part of the job that pays me. So I get that done for that reason.
Yeah.
Important part of the job. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's always
we got to get paid.
Exactly. Of course. Yeah.
Super exciting though. I mean, what a rewarding career path.
It really is. I feel so fortunate to have somehow found my way here. And, it wasn't the traditional way that people get there, but I wouldn't change a thing because it's been rewarding the whole way, everything that I've done. I tell my kids this sometimes, I feel like I've just followed what I have fun doing.
Yeah. That's great.
What do I enjoy? And luckily, fortunately for me, it's worked out. I have a good job and so I feel very lucky in that respect.
It's interesting because I know other people that have said the same things, that they feel like, and I know it happened for me too, which it's when you find something that works or you find something that's right for you, things seem to kind of fall into place somehow, and it sounds crazy, but it seems like it's a real thing sometimes. It's I don't know what that is, but do you feel like that kind of happened? I mean, you still have to work for it, but you know what I mean? It's like, or maybe you're just more, inspired, like because you like it, you kind of go more in that direction. So you notice what's good opportunity, but I've heard it from other people. So it's really interesting.
I totally, I agree with you. And I feel that way. And this is probably going to sound a little bit kooky, but I feel like if you have positive energy around what you're doing, then you're going to attract people to it. Right.
I agree.
So
I agree with you too.
By loving what we do, we attract people to want to do it too, or the people that, patients see that and then they want to learn more about it, or neurologists see that and hear that, and then they want to work with you with those patients too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Building
and
excitement.
Too, right? Yeah.
And people can sense when that's genuine interest and skill and stuff like that, I think, like, because I know I encounter that as well. It's like, it's like people detect authenticity and passion and stuff like that. So I think when you find something that's a right fit for you and you're able to transmit that, it really helps. So, and clearly, I mean, you have found the right fit for you.
Right. Well, and it's funny because it makes me think of you as well with what you're doing now with the science writing and the podcast and the social influencing, because I remember when we were in grad school, we called you our social ambassador. You were friends with everyone. You knew what everyone's projects were. Everyone
continues to be this.
You're welcoming to everyone. And so it's like I don't know if you'll be your guest on your own podcast, but you have a similar story. It's just you've ended up in a different
we are
career,
in a later date
master connectors.
Yeah, in the later date, me, Lindsay, and Heidi will also be talking about our own trajectories. We'll be interviewing each other. So
yeah.
Awesome. Well, we'll definitely tune in for that.
Yeah, thank you. So I think you touched upon some of these like in your discussion, but we'll just kind of go, we don't need to delve too much into it, I think, because like you talked about a little bit, but just in general, like I think you said, for example, being able to communicate science, which of your skills that you have, or I guess your traits that you felt came in most handy for your job? You know what I mean? For this job is one question.
That's a good question. So I think multitasking has been a good trait, right? Because I'm always doing several things at the same time.
Yeah.
And just being self-motivated and driven. Yeah. To do whatever the next thing is that you need to do, whether it's from the business development side, from the patient education side, or just, clinical follow-up.
Yeah.
Being able to handle doing all of that at the same time has been helpful. I do think, so one of the things I think that sets me apart from my colleagues is the fact that I am like data driven. So, if I can collect some numbers and put them in an Excel sheet, like I feel at home, like I feel very warm and happy. And so whenever I can, I will collect data. And so sometimes this data can actually be beneficial. So, one of the recent examples I have is that we recently came out with this lead that stimulates, but it can point it in a specific direction. Mm-hmm. And so I actually let a couple of the centers use this new lead for a year. But then I went back and collected the data over the past years and said, okay, are they using a directional feature more than they were using this omnidirectional feature? Because you can still do it, the old traditional way, or you can use the new enhanced features. Yeah. And it's kind of been an argument in the community of, does it really matter, right? We have this new fancy thing, but does it matter? Well, I was actually able to collect the data and do some statistics on it and put it in this pretty little graph and show that actually it does matter, and I won't quote the numbers because I'll probably get in trouble with someone somewhere for doing that, but for sure it matters, and I can say it with clarity, it matters. Look, I have the numbers. And then, one of the things I was on a call with today was, talking about touching more neurologists and we were talking about, well, what is the cadence that we need, or how many times you actually have to talk to someone before they remember you? And I was like, hey guys, you know what, we need to come up with a survey to do to ourselves, write a cadence survey, and then graph it with all these different neurologists that we're touching and see, we could answer this question with data. And everyone just looks at me and they're like, they first give me that look like another spreadsheet. I'm like, I'll do it. And they're like, okay. I was like, 1,000 data sheets, will you fill it out? I personally will analyze the data. And so I think that's one thing that sets me apart from a lot of people in my field, is that one, they don't really care about the data, right? And two, it just doesn't make them feel happy to be able to run statistics on something that they've collected.
You're getting to, carry over your science training and everything into this. And
that's right.
And you get to do the things you want to do, which is smart. I mean, that's great. Yeah. Like, give me the numbers. Yeah, so, I totally get it. Yeah.
I know. And I will say, like, if you, I was going to just say this real quick for anyone out there that's thinking of this career with a PhD, like, I do, I hate to like toot my own horn or anything, but I can read the science, right? And really understand what were the analyses that were run? What does it mean? Is what they're saying really supported by the data? And I can have those high level conversations with neurologists, or with any physician really.
Yeah.
And I think that is I have found that really useful, that I think even this field didn't know it could be a useful thing out in the field.
Yeah. See, there you go. Exactly. That's like an example of what I'm talking about. Yeah. That's interesting. It makes sense, but you don't even realize like it wasn't expected, or let's say that might not be something that people realize we're going to improve it that much. And now, that, having those skills.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there are a lot of transferable skills that we pick up, in graduate training that we don't even necessarily put labels to until we need to. So there's probably many more of these that we have.
It's funny that you say that, because that's kind of what like we're trying to do with this podcast, try to figuring out, because like one that I know is, being self-motivated or being really good at problem solving and stuff like that. But like there's other things like that, communicating science, or not knowing how helpful that is, like just realizing, so that's kind of important to figure out. That's one of the things we want to figure out. So thank you so much for those examples.
I think your podcast is going to bring a lot of awareness to graduate programs on like what, because when we were in grad school, they brought in, professors that spoke on what they were doing in their lab as like research options, right?
Yeah.
But this podcast, I feel like, is going to really open the eyes so that maybe grad students will have more options and more exposure to different career paths than they might have in the past.
Yeah. And that's the thing. So like, we want to start with what we know, which is like science-based transitions and PhDs, but just in general, how many people have gotten a bachelor's degree and then did something completely different? We're even going to do some of that kind of stuff down the line when get people that know about that, because in reality, these days, everybody changes their jobs so much. And then there's a lot of angst around it sometimes. And it's actually reality. And it's like being flexible and seeing what's out there. But people don't necessarily tell the things that's what we're trying to show, like different aspects of what's out there. Right. So
I think a lot of people.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think a lot of people don't even realize what skills they have. And especially graduate students, especially like new PhDs, a lot of times it's like, okay, I have this now. What can I actually do? Because I can't get that faculty position. I need to go do a postdoc, or I need to go do this and that. And it's like, you actually have a lot of skills.
Yeah.
You just have to sit down and think about those that you're really passionate about. Like Elaine's, passion around, neuroscience and just kind of going for it, and recognizing those skills.
Definitely. And the same across the spectrum. People learn a lot of things during their bachelor's degree and their master's degree that they don't even realize, and you can really expand on it in different directions. So along these lines, was there any skills that you didn't have that you wish you had before you started the job?
Of course not. I was perfect when I started.
Hey, I'm not going to argue with you. It sounds like it's true.
There probably, I can't think of any right now. And I know that when I first started this job, I learned a whole lot about business development and like how, to work with hospitals for contracts. I mean, things that I had no idea about. And luckily, you know, my company I had really great support.
Yeah, that's good.
And they helped me with that part. But, you know, I don't know that, like, if I had learned it before the job, I would have even bothered learning it, right? Like, it wasn't even something that I was very interested in.
Yeah. But because it was applying to something you're interested in, then you have the motivation to learn it. I'm like that too. So
that's exactly right.
Yeah, I'm like that
you
too.
made that connection and it became interesting.
You know, the one thing I do wish is that I could speak Spanish fluently. So like we have had, you know, and I lived in Central America, so I can speak some Spanish and understand some of it, but, you know, I can't actually have a conversation about deep brain stimulation in Spanish.
Yeah, fair enough.
But it would be really cool. That's the one thing that would be really cool to do, because we've had to have translators and stuff come in. But if, you know, that ship sailed, you know, I don't have the capacity in my brain to learn another language at this point.
Yeah, fair enough.
But I wish I could.
So, I think I'm just going to ask like a couple more questions, because, you know, we've kept you for so long. So, and you've said so many really intriguing things that I think you kind of touched upon. So I think you touched upon this, but let's like make it a little more, formalized, which is, what are some personality traits or characteristics that would make someone a good fit or an ill-fitting traits for your job? So like you told us a couple: self-motivated, you know, work a lot, you know, stuff like that.
Yeah.
But what are something that, like, you know, if, for example, for a job as a writer, if you really like people and you only write that, you know, you might not like that, you know, like it's hard because you need to interact with people, like that kind of stuff. So like, is there stuff that, and they could be things that maybe people will evolve over time, but maybe wouldn't be, you know, either a good fit or an ill fit, whatever you comes to mind. Yeah.
Well, you definitely have, I mean, that's a really good question. I mean, I interact with people all day long. So you definitely need to be someone who likes people. And it's in different, you know, it's in different capacities. So if you're interacting with a physician, you might be talking about science or something that's related to patient care. Whereas if you're talking to a patient, you might be trying to help them, you know, work their device from home or educating them. And then, my goodness, you know, the corporate America has so many phone calls. So you're always on a call with somebody about something. And it's funny that you ask it, because like I used to think I was an extrovert, you know, back like in grad school, and, you know, we'd go out and party and have fun and do all these things. But nowadays I'm realizing that maybe I'm not, right? So like after a full day of like interacting with people, I really enjoy coming home and just having everything be quiet and kind of calm. But that could also be my age, you know?
I think it's a combination of things, because I've experienced this too. I think it was part of it is definitely, I think age is a part of it. And also when you have a job where you are expected to interact with people, even if you're an extrovert or if you're an extroverted introvert or whatever you are, I think your batteries need to be recharged. You know what I mean? Like, I think that when you interact with people all day, it's hard to keep that up. And I think, it gets lower as you grow older. I know that I have experienced the same.
Well, that's
relate
good.
to that.
Another, another part of the job is that, like, you know, I feel like I'm always moving, right? Like I'm always on the go, which I love. You know, I cannot sit still to save my life. So like, I love writing, but I don't think I could be a writer because I don't think I could sit still long enough. So, you know, that, I think that's a character trait, is, you know, enjoying the constant move, constantly being on the move is another one. Believe it or not, you know, a good team player, there's a lot of different people that you have to work with. So working well with others and, you know, not letting things bother you too much and just kind of letting it roll off your shoulders.
And one of the things,
good quality.
Yeah. And I definitely hear that you need patience, because it's like patience to help patients, you know, or things like that. Because it sounds like sometimes you're trying to explain things to people that might not understand, or, you know, probably, I imagine, you know, you might have to do the same thing over and over again. So like you need to understand people and also be patient and probably calm for them. So I
love that. You got to have patience. With the patient. Because some of them are calling you from a nursing home, you know, and they might be 90 years old. Someone else might be 45, and then somebody else might have a bad phone connection, and somebody else just might not get it, you know? So You got to have patience for the patients.
Yeah.
But the patients are also what bring the reward.
Yep. And then, so one of the things that I'm going to ask most people, I think, which is, what would be the top 3 tips that you would give to someone interested in pursuing your career path?
Okay, that's a great question. So first thing I would say is, 1, be persistent. Like, no, you're probably not going to get the first or maybe even the 5th or 10th job that you apply to. But be persistent, because once you get your foot in the door with that first device job or pharmaceutical job, just sort of getting in there, it gets a lot easier. Once the door is opened, it's opened, especially after you've proven yourself. The second piece of advice I would give would be, network. Talk to anybody and everyone you can and let them know that's what you're interested in, because you never know who's going to be your advocate to help you get that first position. And quite frankly, if it wasn't for people around me that advocated for me to get this position, I wouldn't have gotten it. I wouldn't have even known about it.
Yeah.
And then, my third piece of advice would be, go after what your gut tells you to go after. If you feel like you love it and it's going to make you happy while you do that, then go for it, no matter what it is.
Yeah. I like that. That's some good advice. And then I came up with a fun question that I'm going to ask, and I'm going to tailor it to the person that's, and actually they asked me a version of this in my qualifying exams, but
okay.
It's a fun question.
Oh,
I promise.
No, I'm going to have flashbacks.
No, it's fun. It's fun. I said, name 3 people, anyone in history or the present, that you would like to have a beer with.
Oh boy. Okay. I would like to have a beer with Oprah Winfrey.
Oh, I like that. That would be
cool.
I
think for a lot of different reasons. I have a lot of things I want to talk to Oprah about.
Yeah.
The second person, I would like to have a beer with Jim Thomas. So that's the guy that was my advisor in my PhD.
Yeah.
Yep. And we went different ways, and I haven't talked to him in a long time.
Really? Yeah.
So he would be a good one to reconnect with.
That's
and then
really sweet,
the third
actually.
person, let's see, the third person, I want this one to be this. I think it's on the tip of my tongue, but I can't quite decide. I think Neil Armstrong.
All right. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be my third person.
Very cool.
All right.
Awesome. So,
all right.
So for our listeners, that's going to conclude the interview. We are going to include some of the information that Elaine gave us, some information about resources. We will also probably include, we're going to be doing this for all the positions we talk about, include if there's resources either we'll provide or the guest will provide that might give you some information about the topic, and also some information about what the salary range or what you can expect monetarily for a job in this industry. So Lindsay and Heidi, do you guys have anything else you want to ask Elaine?
No, I think we covered quite a bit. And I just think that everything that you're doing and the things that led up to, your career have been super interesting and really inspiring, because, it's like, hey, just keep at it, be persistent, stay motivated, look to the skill sets that you're building and find that thing that really, drives you. And I think that's really key, that you have the skills, and that if you have the drive, you can make it happen.
Yeah, exactly. I agree. I feel like it was a really inspirational story of, as you mentioned, being told no, but not letting that really stop you, and just, getting to do what you love. So it's a great story.
Well, thank you all so much. It was really a pleasure to be here, and an honor to be asked to do this. And I love getting to hear Karun's laugh. It's been a while since I've heard that.
I love having you.
It's my favorite.
I love having you as our inaugural guest, because as I knew it would be great. And thank you so much. We learned a lot, and your story is very inspiring. It has inspired me in the past, so that's why I had invited you. And also, you know how to tell a good story, and we really appreciate that. So thank you. And we appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks again for having me, ladies.
Yes. All right. So thank you.
Yeah,
And
it's such a pleasure.
Yeah.
And we look forward to the next Business of Doing Science podcast. Thank you for joining us and listening to the Business of Doing Science podcast. For more information on our guests and access to career development resources, please click on the link to our website below. And remember, you can also visit the website to learn more about how Bagami and Sai can help you do science.